Hey, welcome everybody to another Giver Marketing Network Masterclass. I'm here with Julie Nowacki, and she is a great business owner, a person of faith. She owns Convergent Promotions, and she's going to share with us today a little bit of her story, first of all. So it's so great to have you be able to connect with us. And we're going to be talking about branding and how that connects with PR and events. And if you're an author, a speaker, an influencer of any kind, a musician, or you're part of events often, then this is going to be the session for you. The master class is going to cover consistency, conciseness, clarity, and collaboration around branding. And we're going to have a lot of fun today. But before we jump in, Julie, can you share with us your story? Like, how did you get into what you're doing? Like the short version of like, okay, I started off here, but then now I started Convergent Promotions. How did that all start?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. I'm really excited to be here today. My background is very interesting in that I have worked at a record company for 20 years, helping manage and develop artists. And so, from that vantage point, when I walked away from everything in 2016, I just started to see kind of the disunity in my own community and started collaborating with other organizations and people. And from that, it just started happening that I was getting different strategies and visions for how to bring more substance into what other people were doing. And so it's just kind of been something I fell into, but then I became really passionate about and I guess was really good at. And so people would seek me out and I would have conversations with them and they would share with me their vision of their organization, business, ministry. And we would just kind of dialogue. And out of that, a lot of things have been developed.
Great. So you've had this kind of journey of helping others get the word out, kind of promoting and getting their brand dialed in and some events coordinated and some of these kind of things. And we're excited to hear a little bit more around the branding piece. So tell us what you had. You had these four pieces that it caught my eye when I was looking at it. I'm like, oh yeah, we should talk about this. This is that
Mhm.
our audience is going to love this. So what are those four bullet points that you kind of got the kind of got this almost like a little blueprint dialing in here? What are they?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because this past week I haven't been feeling the greatest. And I know, Tim, when I saw that there was an opportunity to talk about branding, I was like, oh, I could do that. Like, that sounds fun. And I've
Yeah.
talked about it before, but I've never really put it into like actual a teaching. And so
Mhm.
as I was laying there, I was like, okay, let me just go back into kind of my arsenal of what I do with people. And I came up with four different C words. And so, I started with, okay, we have to be consistent. When you are branding something, you cannot be all over the place because you will confuse your audience. Every brand, every organization, anything that you set out to do, you're going to have a target market. You're going to have a target audience. And if you confuse them with pictures or images, like you have a tree, but then you have, like a ship, it's going to be really confusing. And the most important thing to do before you start anything is to make sure that you're consistent. And it
Mm.
has to start from the beginning because I'm not saying that you can't rebrand. There's nothing wrong with rebranding, but
Mhm.
really be intentional when you're starting something so that you can carry it through to completion.
Okay.
So consistency is key.
Now, when you're talking about consistency, are you talking about consistency with uh, language, imagery, any kind of and when we talk about imagery, we're talking about any like everything from fonts to the pictures you're
Yep.
using to the
Yep.
like anything our eyes can see should be fairly consistent with some, with some character, obviously, and some
Right.
variation, but there's a consistent thread all the way through. So you're like, oh, that's Julie, or oh, that's Giver, or that oh, that's Convergent, or oh, that's this.
Mhm.
Like, you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, that's that church," or, "Oh, that's that business," or that's
Right.
you associate it with all your previous memories, start
Yes.
pulling in because of that consistency of what is it? Imagery and language, basically, at the
Yep.
end of the day.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Pay attention to language and imagery. That's exactly right, Tim, because each brand has its own language. Because
Okay.
the visionary of the brand has something they're trying to communicate to the audience. And so you want to make sure that that's consistent because people are attracted to language. I always tell my clients, pay attention to language and the conversations that you're having with others because something more than likely will resonate in your spirit and you'll be like, that word. Like right now, the word for me is
Oh,
renaissance. Renaissance. When I hear the word renaissance, my spirit, it leaps because God is putting something inside of me for a renaissance age.
mm,
And it's just, again, pay attention to the language. And also, there's old language that may be a part of something that you were doing. Don't be afraid to go into that new language that's like, I don't really know what that means, but I want to dive into that a little more. I want to talk with this person more because there's something new that they are communicating that I resonate with.
got it. I know you and I have been working with some of these, like at least one blockchain company that is a Christian company, but it's working around the blockchain space, and a lot of people are like, "What is that? Like, what is that?" But it's a clue to what you're willing to be involved with. Sometimes we have
Mm-hmm.
spiritual language. You
Yep.
just said God showed you something, and I was a pastor for 15 years. You've been a minister for decades, and we've gotten to know each other over those kind of conversations. That's why we're here
Mhm.
today, because your
Right.
brand is awesome, right? So, and that's why I'm privileged. We're privileged to hear from you because you're great. You're awesome. So tell us a little bit more. On the screen, we have the name of your company. We got a little
Mhm.
logo, kind of part of a logo up there in the upper left corner. You got some language down below. You got a
Mhm.
cool backdrop. Can you can you share with us, just before we pull this image off the screen and go into roundtable discussion here in a few
Yeah.
minutes? Can you share with us, like, why this image for today? Like, just give us a just boots on the ground, like in the moment, kind of a meta explanation of what tell explain to us this visual that you have here
Yeah,
from a
absolutely.
branding perspective. How does
Yeah,
this
so
play in?
so I have to credit this to my husband. He is the
Oh,
one who created this. So I think it's really funny because when the Lord kind of gave us this name, and it really gave my husband the name Convergent Promotions after we were doing some mobilizing here locally in our community. We've had this for 2000 since 2016.
mhm.
Now we haven't really mobilized it as much since 2020 is really when it became a business. It was really a ministry. I was just coming alongside of different events and concerts and movies and saying, how can I help get the word out in my own locale? Because I'm very connected, especially in the faith based community. And so my husband was like, how about convergent promotions? And again, language. I was like, what does convergent even mean? God will conceal until it's time to reveal. So this whole logo has such a funny description of how it even came to be because my husband designed the logo. And if you see, it's kind of got like a C and a P and a cross in the middle, right?
Ah, good point. I see it now.
When I
Yeah.
first saw that, I was like, no, that's not it. And I was actually reaching out to other graphic designers and saying, hey, this is what we're looking at. Could you put something together? Well, long story short, we ended up coming back to the one my husband designed. And it's so perfect for what it is that we do because we want to light fires across the nation, the globe, the world. And so when he found this, again, I just was like, this is it. This is
Okay.
it. And
So
now,
you got the logo itself, kind of the artistic, iconic image in the upper left corner, and this is like branding 101, ladies and gentlemen. So like pay really close attention. What Julie's showing us here is just really it's not something that needs to be overcomplicated. It's just really fun way to creatively express yourself as a company or organization doing good in the world, right? So, and then you got the font of Convergent Promotions, a specific font that you probably use across the board to stay consistent, or at least to the best of your ability within reason. There's some platforms and some places you just can't choose a font, but whenever you can choose a font, you're using that threaded, like I know that Giver Marketing is Byington. I know that's the font that we generally use, right? And it's like, where is that? I don't know. We just found it and we loved it and we fell in love with it. You have a font there that you probably use across the board, and the name is 2 words, so that's kind of cool because it's kind of pretty easy to remember. And the imagery behind it speaks to the story, even of just the slide. I'm not talking about everywhere, but the imagery behind it will probably speak to the story to some degree. Like, you're a worldwide influencer, right? You may not have millions of clients. You probably don't want millions of clients, but you have clients from different parts of the region, of the nation, and you even influence folks across the world. So you feel like a global servant is probably the best way from our
Mhm.
conversation. You serve more than just maybe a few folks in your neighborhood, right? Which is
Right.
not
But that's where it started though. But that's where it started. And I want to make sure people realize that it started locally. Then it created a global influence because I stewarded where I was planted. I didn't say I want to go influence a nation without taking care of my own community.
Come
So,
on, come on, that'll preach. I
so
mean, I'm thinking of Acts chapter 1 and 2, or the early part of Acts where it says, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, then the uttermost parts of
right?
the world. And here I am
Mhm.
starting to preach, so you better pull me down. But I'm just saying, like,
Yep.
starting local is no joke from a branding perspective.
Right.
If you if you can't impact your local region to some extent and get your reps
Right.
in, why
Right.
in the world would you be? I mean, honestly, that's disillusionment if you're going to influence the whole world without taking care of business in your own
Right.
town, right? So,
Right. Yep.
okay, so that makes sense, or at least with with your people, right? Your people you
Right.
already know, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
some folks have digital businesses and they don't always go and frequent with the local
Right.
community, but they
Right.
have
Yeah.
their digital people, their friends, family, and associates digitally just on social media. So
Right.
that's a kind of a local
Yeah.
starting place, right? So, all
Mhm.
right, so you got your logo, you got your font for your business name, and then what about this subtext underneath, kind of the explanatory language? Is that always necessary? Sometimes necessary? Like what? eh, eh, How many
Yeah.
words? Like there's too many words. Sometimes there's
Right.
not enough. Like how do we
So
discern that?
yeah, so this is really kind of like the different layers of the logo.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll take out just that logo that has the C and the P and
Okay.
put it on different promo. It won't say convergent promotions because I want convergent promotions to be like a household brand where people see that logo. They don't have to see the name Convergent Promotions, just like Pepsi, right? Just like
Mhm.
Coca-Cola. Like you see it, you know it. You don't have to know all the specifics of it. So this is a layered brand where sometimes we use just the logo, sometimes we'll use just the Convergent Promotions.
Okay.
And the services offered to authors, speakers, musicians, and events, that obviously explains what it is that we do. So when
Sure.
people see this, they're like, oh, I want to find out more. So, what's interesting too is, again, I said pay attention to imagery, pay attention to the language. This logo, this kind of world with the lights and stuff, I see it popping up in all these different things. And I'm like, whoa, they get it too. And
Yep.
this again was established in 2016. So
Mm.
we have been stewarding this for 7 years without honestly stepping into it thinking we were going to monetize it.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Looking
so it's been
full
a real
time job.
labor of like a labor of love, a
Yep,
passion, a
yep.
calling. And so at this point, now we have the visuals. I'm gonna go ahead and just remove the visuals for
Yeah,
now, if that's okay. Is that okay? Are we good with we can
yeah. Do
just
you
go
want
into
me to
the
remove it or can you do it?
I got it. I got it.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
so this will bring your kind of your picture up a little bit more for the audience to see you and know how to spell your name if they want to look you up personally. And speaking of that, before we get into conciseness and clarity and collaboration and some other pieces that we're going to be covering, uh, here's a question I ask almost every marketing and branding and business professional. Okay,
Mhm.
when do you know that your personal name has become less of the brand and your company name has flipped the script. When do you know that that's happened? When should it happen? Do you have any clues, tips? If you don't, that's fine. I'm just
No, that's
asking, like, obviously coming out the gate, people know more about Julie Nowacki than they do.
I don't know about that though, because I set up Convergent so that I wasn't the one behind it. I'm very incognito about putting my name out there on things.
Okay, so
It's,
you're one of the
yep,
quiet types behind the scenes that picks your
yep,
spots. Okay, okay. So that's a personality. Pick that up,
yep,
ladies and gentlemen. There's a
yep.
personality type that they want people to know their name, whether it's associated with this company or this company or this company. They want people, the main brand is their personal name. And so that's personal branding, right? That's your personal name. But then there's your company name, right? So you have to decide which one's going to be the lead horse in
Hmm.
this race. And that there's nothing wrong with one or the other. You just have to decide that kind of from the beginning. And you might have a little bit of a, I guess it would be a different kind of work that is needed to develop those brands. But there's some bullet points or some principles that can apply to both, either a personal brand or a company brand. Let's talk about conciseness. How does that work?
So, conciseness is really about making sure that what you're communicating doesn't have too many components. So, it confuses your audience. And so, because again, I worked for a record company, I helped develop artists, take them all the way from, I feel called to music all the way to the recording studio. I know a lot about language and editing and writing and how to create an image through your writing and to bring emotion into it. And so when you capture someone through emotion, it's common to man. They may not be able to identify with the exact experience, but there is an emotion that they feel that gravitates that person towards what you're doing, and they want to be a part of it. So the less information you can give, but actually bring more emotion and imagery into what you're communicating, the greater impact. I tell a lot of my authors, you do not need to basically have 80 to 120,000 words to get a book out. Mini books, like little books that people can actually get through, is more powerful because you're actually having to be more intentional with what you're communicating, because you're not just putting filler words in to get the word count.
Good point. Good
And
point.
so I think it's really important, our intentionality of what we're communicating, so that we don't overwhelm an audience with too much information because we want to appear as though we're intellectual or brilliant. That's not where people attract. It's, how do you make me feel when I listen to you?
Mm,
What are the emotions that you're stirring up inside of me to make me feel like I want to pursue something that's greater than what I'm doing?
okay. I know we're going to have some conversation about conciseness and when to have long form, short form, a big book versus a small, like, booklet, or a guide. I know we're going to have some, because we got some folks in the green room ready to jump into our roundtable discussion here in a few minutes. So I'm excited about that. And those who are on the social feeds that are watching this live, put your questions in the comments. We got Stacy Stockford conducting the orchestra behind the scenes right now, checking in on your comments. And we'll try to get to them the best that we can if time allows. But put them in, and eventually Julie will go back and check them out too, and
Yeah.
kind of answer questions for you too. All right, clarity. This is a fun one. Like, this is a hard one, but it's a fun one at the same time. It's like that. It's like that good workout. Like, how do we get the clarity dialed in when it comes to our personal brands, our business, our organizational brands, even the events we're involved with? Like, how do we do that?
Well, again, I think it has to do with, you have to be consistent with what it is that you're trying to communicate.
Okay.
And you have to take kind of that macro level vision that you have and bring it down to a micro level and start piecing it out and strategizing. Okay, so if I go this direction, these are the steps that I need to take that are going to create this outcome. And so it's one of those things that you have to spend, I believe, the most of your time on, because it's what's going to move things forward or backwards. Because the less clarity that you have, the more confusing it's going to be for what you're trying to communicate.
Write that down, ladies and gentlemen. The less clarity, the more confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds obvious, but that's worth writing down, because for folks like you and me, Julie, and others who are like ideators, and we get a lot of ideas coming in a room, like that's part of our gift, is we just invite ideas to bring that to like one or two main focal points is absolutely necessary. And I would say this, ladies and gentlemen, to her point, to Julie's point about clarity, if you're not strong in the area of clarity, bring a third party in, or a second opinion in on what it is you're trying to do, and see if you can have somebody come in as literally like a clarity coach. They just come in, ask you a bunch of questions. What is it you really want to do? Who do you really want to serve? How do you really want to be experienced? How does this make people feel? What's the end result? Like all of these great questions that Julie will have for you, or others will have for you if you connect with them. They'll bring clarity just by having a conversation.
Yep.
And they might charge a little bit for that time, but it'll save you hours and hours and hours of confusing your audience, and potentially even years of confusing your audience. So just a few, 45 minutes to an hour or something with Julie or somebody like that can bring a lot of clarity as kind of at least an initial coaching session or something. Okay. So I have a suggestion here, ladies and gentlemen. We have one more tip around branding and kind of your promoting your brand and your events and different things. Okay. But we just talked about consistency and conciseness. And I know we're live, Julie, but I'm just saying, I can't help but notice that if you put consistency plus symbol, conciseness equals clarity. If you're consistent and you're concise, there is a default clarity that comes just at the base level. Like there's more clarity that can come, obviously. That's why it's on the list. But if you do both of those first two things, you're going to be on the road to clarity, and then you can just get even more clear and more clear. I love that. Julie, we need to have another session, because I know you've helped me on a couple things. We need to have another session on clarity, because we have so many ideas flowing around our network. It's like, what should we do? And actually, this Tuesday Masterclass that you're on right now came from a brainstorming session. And we're just inviting all of our awesome friends and associates to come and bring their genius. It's super fun. All right. What's the last four, or the fourth one? What's the last one?
Collaboration.
Ooh.
That one I think we could spend a lot of time on, because when you're in a space of whether it's business, whether it's organizational work, whether it's ministry work, a lot of competition and comparison can come in. And we will not change the world if we do not allow others to sometimes rise above us and champion them in that. So collaborating with those individuals that are actually going to cheer you on. Maybe at one point you're going to be right there in the front lines, and they're going to be on the bench cheering you on, and it's going to flip. And then they're going to be on the front lines. Can we be so bold to actually cheer each other on, because we need people to be great so everyone can be greater? I think that was the hardest challenge for me, and why Convergent Promotions really became something was because there was such disunity in my own community when we had an opportunity to bring Danny Goki and Passion and Holland into our city. And they had rented out the amphitheater, a very incredible outdoor space that could seat 5,000 people. They had only sold 700 tickets 3 days before the event. So I contacted the venue and I said, what can I do? I'm super connected in this community. How can I help get the word out? They printed out 1,750 free tickets. We dispersed those in the community within 48 hours. We had an additional 1,400 people show up at that concert. The reason why there was such a challenge was because a lot of the different churches did not share what was going on. And I said, why not? This is like a worship service in our community at an incredible outdoor theater. Why can we not get the word out?
Yeah, that's like a multi-church, like
Right?
denominational, multi-group kind of like don't even have to be a
Exactly.
church. You could be like a ministry out in the region somewhere just wanting to come
Exactly.
hang out with some great music, right? So
Yes.
that was very open to the community, but a little bit of that, like, that's not gonna promote our thing enough,
Right.
so we're not gonna
Right.
go to that.
Yep.
Yeah, Stacy said something in the comments, or somebody else did, I think it was Stacy, said something about the fear component of collaboration. Can you speak to that a little bit more from your experience, Julie?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of people have to get over the fear of man because, people are
Not
afraid to,
just men, right? Men and women, like
oh, yes,
right, right,
right, men and women.
like
Yeah.
fear of other
Right.
humans,
The
right?
fear
Okay.
of people, and I think people are afraid to fail. And you know what? Like, success is failure. You have to fail in order to succeed. And I think if you step into that, like, well, I'm just not going to try because I'm going to fail. Well, guess what? You've already failed because you haven't tried. You haven't put something into place to see, well, could this be something that would actually come to fruition? Or am I so dependent on my own skills, people, strengths that I'm not even going to try? And so when you collaborate with others, they actually draw out some maybe weaknesses that you have because you haven't been able to exercise those. Maybe they've been dormant. And so when you get around collaborators, when you get around people that have a heart to serve and to ignite other people, there's just a natural thing that happens that you're like, I want to be better because I see what's happening and I want that in my own life. And so you actually take away the great impact that you can have if you don't collaborate.
Hey, there's people right now that are listening to this, either live or in the recording in the future. They're they're listening right now, and that imposter syndrome is just minimizing right now as we speak, because that word of encouragement, or those words that you just gave us that were strengthening, that can crush this. Look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Look up imposter syndrome. It's a real thing. Like, we all
Mhm.
have it to some degree at different levels, but that needs to be really minimized. Okay, so here's a question: When do we discern that it's not a good idea to collaborate? Where is the boundaries here? Like, we don't. It's like generosity, right? You don't just
Right,
randomly give random things to random people for random reasons. Like,
right.
there's usually a purpose behind collaboration. Like, how do we know when not to collaborate without diving into this fear cesspool?
Yeah, I think it's really, you hit it. I mean, you have to pay attention to how does that person or group make you feel and look at their kind of background. If they don't have fruit from what they've been doing and they just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, but there's no fruit, pay attention to that because you will not be given more if you aren't faithful with little. And so a lot of times people, they will jump from one thing to the next thing to the next thing because they don't have the stamina, or they don't have whatever they need to be able to succeed in that. And then relationships, pay attention to their relational equity. Do they have a lot of burnt bridges? And
Mm,
this is a small community. Like, I mean,
mm,
right? I mean, people know people who know people. So it's like, pay attention to where are they at in their conversations with others.
mm.
Pay attention to what they're talking about. Are they putting down people to make them sound better?
Ooh,
Are they talking negative? You don't want to be around people like that, because if they're sharing negative information or just haughty attitude, or if they're just trying to appear that they are so much more than what they are, then they could be that kind of person in your life. You don't want someone who walks in that level of pride or
Okay.
haughtiness because, you
So what I'm
know,
hearing is you're saying, look at their track record, which and if you're in the Christian circles or the spiritual circles, look at their fruit. It's the same thing,
Mhm.
right? Look at
Yep.
their kind of their journey and see what's actually been happening,
Mhm.
like practically, like just be aware, like just take
Right.
ask questions, like
Yeah.
and ask for references, like who do you know that I could talk to that you've worked with besides your brother and your cousin? Like who can I talk to that you've worked with and just kind of get an idea
Mhm.
of your style? Like those are good questions to see if they're aligned. Alignment for collaboration. And I wonder if, Julie, what are your thoughts about doing like micro tests or micro projects, like small projects to see if there's actual, like you think there's alignment, everything looks good, but just to test it out. I
Well,
don't know.
absolutely. I
I
don't think there's anything wrong with, like, I mean, what I do prior to taking on a client, because I have quite the threshold and requirements before I take on a client, is I have a connection call with them. And
mm,
I see kind of where they're at and see if there's something that resonates in me that wants to be a part of what they're doing. Or sometimes I'll just have a 20-minute connection call and I'll give them some ideas and give them some connections and resources and send them on their way.
okay. All right. So
Because
you're
you can't work
blessing,
with everyone.
you're giving no matter what. You're blessing no matter what. It's a well worth the time, but you're doing those upfront conversation. And it sounds to me like you don't view your clients as an ATM machine. You view your clients as collaborators on a mission. Is that
Yes,
is that
that's good.
a
Yep.
little bit more okay? Because I know that there's a lot of folks in the marketing space that get a bad rap, just like any other industry, right? Where we basically are just out to grab people's money and get them all excited about something, overpromise, underdeliver, and then we're off to the next project. And I don't sense that with you at all. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, when you meet with Julie, just ask her some of those questions. Just ask her like, how do you work? Why is it you work with
Mhm,
certain clients? Would you consider collaborating with me? What would it take to
mhm,
collaborate with you, Julie? And sometimes it does require some funds on the front end, but sometimes the funds can be delivered on the back end. Like who knows? Like you don't
mhm.
know. It
Yep.
it depends. Like
Yep.
we've been Julie and I have been working with one, just connecting with one project, and the relationships that are being built alone are worth in the tens of thousands of dollars. I
Mhm.
can't put a price tag on it. Like
Right.
I
Right.
now people are yeah, there's just a lot going on behind the scenes, super fun, and it's all positive. So it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh my gosh, okay." So
Yeah.
now we're talking about equity in companies and all sorts of other things, and this happens all the time because you put your best foot forward. You have boundaries.
Yep.
You gotta make sure you're aligned with the
Absolutely.
right person, but a few $1,000s on the front end is worth a lot less than equity on the back end. So,
Mhm.
in many cases, so it just depends on the situation, but bottom line, collaboration's a superpower if you can develop that muscle, ladies and gentlemen. And Julie just gave us a charge to do that. And that is, by the way, that's the secret sauce of Giver Marketing Network. It's a secret sauce for Julie and others who are kind of part of this greater ecosystem. And by the way, if you run a network of some kind, don't be afraid to collaborate with other networks.
Right.
It's the
Yes.
same individually as it is collectively.
Yep.
Like, take the fear to a minimum.
Mhm.
I'm okay with caution, but I'm not okay with unhealthy fear. Like,
Right.
I'm with
Yep.
you, Julie. Like,
Yep. Yep.
if I get
Yep.
burned, I'm not gonna go and get burned again. Like, I'm careful when I drive, things like that,
Right.
but that's
Yeah.
that's caution. But
Yep.
but like, unhealthy fear where, like, somebody's out to get me or I'm the victim or,
Right.
I'm gonna get over on some people and so they don't get on me. Like, try to heal from that, try to move
Yep.
on from that, try to
Mhm.
be around people that are on the journey of healthiness too. Like,
Yes.
building
Yes.
their business in a healthy way that's not gonna go away tomorrow because some tool
Right.
or some tactic or some shiny object goes away.
Yep.
Alright. So that's what I wanted to hear from you, Julie, on those 4 things. I was, like, really excited when I saw them. I'm like, "Yes." I know that, you've worked hard to put this together and kinda get your thoughts together on this. Let's pull in some of our friends, just a couple of friends from the network so that we can have a roundtable discussion. And Julie's kind of on the hot seat at this point. This will be fun.
I love it.
For our team members to and start asking questions and maybe a comment or two at the end, but mostly questions of just like for Julie around those 4 words. And just to run through them really quickly again, when it comes to your brand and your company, your personal brand, your events, all these things: consistency, conciseness, clarity, and then that last beautiful word, collaboration. Those 3 or 4 things always being considered, your brand will go through the roof. Lots of good things will happen. Julie, I got a story for you before we get into questions.
Yeah.
Joel and Jennifer and Tim and Stacy, if you have questions, get them ready because we're going to put Julie on the hot seat. It'll be fun. But I was working for a company called Faith Highway, and I was making 100 calls a day. This was back when phone calls were like the thing, right? It was only like 10 years ago, but no, I would never do this. I would not recommend this, but I was making 100 phone calls a day to these nonprofit organizations that faith-based, Faith Highway, right? Faith-based organizations. And I ended up in conversations with thousands and thousands of people all over the United States and then some other smaller countries as well. And I noticed the pattern. And the pattern was very similar to what you just shared with us today. That pattern put people in the top like 10% of their particular region or industry or sector because they applied similar principles to what you just said today. And I'm telling you, it was a survey. I was sitting there talking to the top 10% influencers and those who were impacting the most amount of people and generating the most revenue for their mission and all that kind of thing. They were following your advice, this kind of thing. And the ones that were wondering, why don't people remember me? Why don't people understand what we're doing? Why don't people get it? Why isn't there more people interested? Why are more eyeballs not on what we're doing? Why do we not have more team members? Why do we not have all those same questions that I would get came back down to these kind of things.
Love it.
So I really appreciate you kind of summing that up today. Super cool. All right, who's got the first question for Julie? Let's just fire them off, and then we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. But who's going to break the ice? Joel? Yes. Break the ice, Joel. What do you got for Julie?
So I just have a question. When you're talking about positioning your brand to a specific kind of market, do you ever modify your brand identity to be more relevant to that market's perception? Does that make sense?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to know how to modify, depending on what the brand is. I mean, you don't want to compromise your brand to fit into something that they're wanting you to be a part of. Because there are things that I will not partner with. I just won't, right? So I'm not gonna compromise my brand. But I think you have to have wisdom into how you approach it. Because what's interesting is through this work, I've actually worked now on 7 political campaigns. Now, I had never saw myself going into government or politics. Never, right? So it wasn't my brand that they were seeking out. It was my experience and skill set, because I wasn't promoting this brand within the politics. I wasn't. People just saw what I was doing and they're like, wow, she's an influencer. She knows people. She knows how to get things done. We want her a part of what we're doing.
So there might be like, if I'm hearing what you're saying, Julie, there might be some core values or some like a mission statement or some vision language that's underpinning everything. It's like the rebar in your foundation. Like it's actually the strength to your foundation, that if you like Tim talks about noble purpose all the time. If there's not this thing that drives you and that doesn't align with this project that you're working with, there's no amount of language changing you can do that's actually going to
Right.
make sense long term. You might be able to get a few months of working together out of the deal, but you're having a tug of war the whole time at that point because your core
Yeah.
values may not be. So as long as the core values are aligned, is what I'm hearing, you should be able to at least highlight certain things over other things to make sure they feel comfortable in working together. But if that doesn't work, there's nothing else you can do, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was just verbally processing. I'm trying to remember what you were saying a little bit better. Huh.
I have a question.
Yeah, what do you got?
I'm curious just about the process. So we talk about consistency, conciseness, clarity, collaboration. So your political party comes to you and says, "Hey, I stumbled across you. I like what you're doing." What is it that you actually? What's the process that you kind of go through to help them in these 4 areas? An example.
Yeah. So I think it depends on what you're being asked to do. So I've done everything from campaign management to just making phone calls and door knocking. So it's based on what it is that they're looking to fill and how can you fill it. And because of my vast experience in many different sectors and because of how influential apparently I am, I can kind of serve the purpose that they have in whatever capacity that I feel is needed. And sometimes it's like you're walking this really narrow lane. Sometimes they want strategy, sometimes they don't. So you need to honor the place that is obviously inviting you into that space. And sometimes you have to actually go low. You actually have to even take some of the things that you're like, I don't know about this. I would really like to speak into this. If you don't have that permission in that role, then you just kind of file it away. But you pay attention to it because there's something that's being stirred in you to maybe utilize for something in the future. So a lot of times we don't really know the superpowers that we have inside of us until people get around us and they start noticing it. Because you're just operating in who you are. You're just like, well, this is what I do. I don't know. This is all I've done. And that's how I'm wired. And I guess it's a good thing.
Julie, are you saying that your market will give you clues to your superpowers?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
That's a good concept.
Yes. Because
Tim was asking about the process by which you actually take, let's say, I don't want to major on the political stuff, campaigns, because I know that's not all you do, Julie, but let's just use that as an example, just a use case. So I happen to know one of the projects you're working on in the political, because we live in the same state and stuff like that. Okay. What they approach you and say, hey, we noticed you've been active. We like we like your personal brand, your company seems to be doing some good work too. Like, we would like to engage with you. Like, what happens? What do you ask them? What's the process?
Well, I think it's what are they trying to fulfill? Like, what is the goal that they're trying to fulfill based on why they are seeking out, the collaboration?
Okay, so let's say they say we're trying to get this person elected in the next 2 cycles. Maybe not this one, but at least in the next 2 cycles, we need to get this person elected.
Mm-hmm.
What questions do you ask them? Like, what's the process do you take them through?
Well, I obviously find out like where their target market is, right? Okay. Like, who are we focusing on? Which group of people are we focusing on? Okay. Because that's going to give me awareness of, do I have enough influence in that to help you? Or would it be better for you just to hire a national campaign and do your, research polls and event management and coordination,
right?
Just from that, okay. Right?
Got
do
it.
I have enough personal relational equity to feel like I can bring something greater into what it is you're wanting me for?
Wow. I remember working on one, again, I don't want to major on this, but I'm just saying, I remember working on one political campaign. We got 80,000 votes for this cat. And, but the darkness around some of these campaigns outside of the one I was working on was insane. Like people were throwing eggs at what would be our future president at the time as he was walking in the room. I'm like, what? They're throwing physical items at this dude. Like, what? What in the world are they doing? It was just, I'm like, after this campaign, I'm out. I'm gonna send him over to Julie. Like, I'll send him over to people like Julie. I don't know. I don't know if I want anything to do with this. Jennifer, do you got anything? You're always the quiet one listening in, and then you come up with some great, couple of questions. What do you got for Julie?
Well, I had two questions. One is, I agree with you with being concise, because sometimes there are certain business books that when you read the first chapter and a half, you've learned the whole lesson, and then they go on for 15 chapters just so they can be a big book. So I think that is a good thing, that yes, everybody wants that big book to put on somebody's shelf, but really you serve your audience better in making that concise. But how do you balance that with, sometimes you need to go a little bit deeper? Do you think that it depends on the audience or the platform, or how do you know when you should expand things and keep pushing to get the big resource to people?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on your audience. And, sometimes there are moments where, you do a little, like a 15-minute workshop, right? So I can speak 2 minutes or I can speak like 3 hours, right? And so it's like, how much content are you going to allow others to absorb? Because at one moment they will shut you off because it's too much, especially if nothing is stirring in them. And there's like, wow, I just feel like I'm listening to some monotone person that literally has this rehearsed, recorded. There's no like actual personality. Now in a book, it's a little bit different, but again, pay attention to the language. And so I think based on your audience, if they come back to you, and let's say we're going to take the book for an example, right? Reviews. They're like, man, it would be so good if you expanded on this. Or, wow, I was really caught off guard when this was talked about. It gives you clues as to where you could actually even expand. But if you're not getting a lot of feedback, to be honest, it probably isn't something anybody wants to read or listen to. Sometimes people actually write books for therapy. They're like, oh, well, why isn't anybody reading my book? Why isn't it becoming a top seller? Well, did you really think about, did you actually engage an audience before you wrote the book? Did you do some research to see if this was a topic that was actually wanting to be read? And people are just like, well, they're just sitting in my garage. Well, nobody's if they don't know you, why would they pick up your book? So I actually, even when I talk with authors and they come to me and they're like, I have this book idea, start creating your audience now. Start taking quotes that are really resonating in you and start branding them. Come up with a brand, whether it's your name, whether it's a ministry, whether it's an organization, start putting it out there and start capturing people's attention so that when you do have the book, you actually have an audience.
Yes.
And then they are your marketing for the book.
Yeah.
Really good. Good question, Jennifer. I know you do a lot of kind of longer form content that's really rich and thoughtful and put out there well. And I know that, we're all collaborating on different things together. So that's super good question. I also wonder sometimes if we as humans, and this would be a question for you, Julie, do you consider people that are more right-brained and left-brained when you're having conversations with them, more creative versus more logistical when you're having a conversation with them and working with them? Because we all function in both, but some people are way heavier on the creative and others are way more analytical. How do you handle that? Especially when you're putting your own imagery and language and everything together. How does that work even in conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I have a lot of experience working with creatives, right?
Okay.
20 years of artist management. So creatives, they have this idea, and they're like, I have all these ideas. We got to focus on one and try to actually accomplish something and not have all these unfinished things that are just out there, because then that's going to overwhelm you. You're going to procrastinate because you don't know where to start and which one you're going to pick up and where you left off. And so you have to bring it in so that people can be laser focused.
Do you think that artists and creatives have come to you because you have some awareness that ideas are important, but they're not the whole picture, and I can help you coordinate, direct, and promote that idea? Do you think they see a superpower in you that matches with maybe their weakness or their underdeveloped pieces?
Yes, and that is feedback I have received.
Okay.
Like, even to the point of, I thought self-promotion was like something nobody, like, that was such a hard thing for me to even get over, is how am I going to promote myself? But realizing that there's a story inside of you that if it needs to get out, it needs to get out because of the lives that are going to be changed and transformed. And by you keeping it in because you're afraid, that just goes back to the fear of what is going to happen if I succeed, or what is going to happen if I fail. Because some people are actually afraid of success. They don't know what they're going to do with it. And so they actually self-sabotage because they start overthinking what something is going to be. So creatives, I do believe, are attracted to my personality and my mindset, because I can take an idea, because I've done this with, our Creative Arts and Therapy Center. I can take an idea and I can actually bring it into reality.
Got it. So you actually, speaking of process, which is what Tim was talking about, you can actually take kind of that long form brainstorming idea and either leave it long form and just fill it out a little bit better, like Jennifer was talking about, or we can get it really concise, at least for the time being. One of the things I've noticed is when somebody's first coming out the gate and they're pretty fresh, like the first couple of years, the more simple you can get, the better, because you can always add layers. Yeah. If you have like 17 layers from the beginning, that alone creates a bit of a bottleneck to your point, Julie, earlier, of just getting concise with it, at least in the beginning. Like, even when people start starting to build their logos and stuff like that, I'm like, before we get you to like Julie or, one of our graphic designers or a team member or somebody, like, just grab something that inspires you, some examples, build your, if nothing else, build your own like black and white version of some imagery that you want, sketch it out or do whatever. Just get something that doesn't have too many colors going yet, so that somebody who knows what they're doing can guide you. It's like somebody trying to dress you with the colors that make sense for your skin tone and all this. It's the same kind of thing, but with your brand. I love that you brought it down to some clarity, conciseness, and consistency language and collaboration. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got time for one more. Stacy, do you got anything in the comments that are popping off anywhere? Any thoughts or summaries for you?
No, there's not really much for comments. I've been putting them along the bottom here. But Julie, I see you as an integrator, like somebody who can take the visions and keep a business owner who has many visionary ideas and get them all onto one stream and going forward. So I am so happy that you spoke with us today. I'm so grateful for this presentation, and welcome to the Giver Marketing Network. And I look forward to learning more. Ladies and gentlemen, I have dropped Julie's calendar link. Please book a time with her and see how you can collaborate with Julie and learn.
Let me say it verbally, Stacy. Real quick, let me say it verbally. It's calendly.com/convergent promotions with an S. Convergent promotions. So it's calendly.com/convergent promotions. And so we'll have it written, and it's also verbal there for those who want to just kind of pop it in. Many are familiar with Calendly. Good choice, Julie. And so we're glad to be able to get some appointments going for you, just like we have for Joel and Jennifer and Tim and and Stacy and others across the network. And so we're just privileged. Thank you again, like Stacy said, for bringing your superpower today. You're
Thank
awesome.
you for having me. This was
Yay.
so fun.
Yeah, we'll do it
Awesome.
again.
Thank
for sure.
you. We'll see you
Blessings,
all again
guys.
next week. Same channel. Next week is all about visibility.
Visibility next week. Yep.
Whoop, whoop.